Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this ninth Fireside Chat that Horwath HTL India has hosted monthly since December last year. And we hope that this is something that you find valuable in terms of bringing you sort of views, knowledge from some very senior leaders in our industry. Today, we've got a very special guest in terms of sort of a person who covers a wide segment of the industry, who makes India travel really. This is Kalra, the founder chairman and the executive chairman of MakeMyTrip Limited. Before I ask Deep to join in, I will complete the housekeeping work, the housekeeping aspect. So if I can please have the housekeeping slide. Essentially, everybody is muted other than Deep and myself so that we can have a uninterrupted conversation. We'd welcome your questions. There are places that you can post your questions within the kind of instrument you're using. Please do not use the raise your hand option because that's not something we track. We do welcome your questions. We've received several questions as part of the preparatory registration process. And my aim is not to ask those questions specifically as each individual question, but to weave it into the conversation. So if you will see that, you may feel that your question hasn't been specifically asked, but I do try to cover it in the conversation itself. So with that, let's get down to hearing from Deep. Deep, will you please join us, camera and audio?
Absolutely.
Good afternoon to you in Gurgaon.
Yeah, good afternoon. I'm in Gurgaon, in our office in Gurgaon, and it's just wonderful to be back. So since the last week or so, I've been coming in and really enjoying it. One has missed one's physical office space. At least I can speak for myself. Zoom is great, and all these video platforms are great. Working from home is obviously great in some respects, but beyond a certain point, it's actually quite terrible. So I'm just delighted to be back. I think everyone else I meet at work also, very few people. We're only back at about 10% strength. It's still voluntary for everyone. Post our second round of vaccinations for the younger lot, as I call it, 18 to 45, which is in a week's time. Then I think a week after that, 10 days after that, we can start pushing and prodding people a little bit less gently to come back to work. I fear people have got too used to the new norm.
Yeah. I mean, if you see, Google has had to tell their employees that if you don't come back to work at the office, they might have to be penalized. So people have gotten used to working from home. And yeah, it's. I agree with you. It's wonderful to be back at one's desk. I've been able to do that from sometime in mid-June. And although we don't allow too many people to come in yet because Mumbai is, the local trains are not working, and even when they do allow the people to come in double vaccinated, we just want to give people time to, let the waves happen before getting our people in. But
absolutely,
that's an aspect of travel that we are talking about. Let's talk about the larger aspect of travel. And you facilitate the travel. You may not make it happen, but you definitely facilitate it. So I think the obvious question that people would want to know from you is, what are you seeing in terms of trends? What trends have you seen through the last almost 18 months? What trends are you seeing now, and how do you see it panning out over the next few months?
Yeah, I think it's obviously something top of everyone's mind. Everyone I meet, by the way, nowadays or speak to, they want to know what's happening in travel. And I love asking them back, when are you planning your next trip? And I was texting Uday Kotak on something earlier today, and he did say he's going on a trip. So I was very happy. I said, we need many more people like you. So what really happened was, after the first lockdown, obviously it was shell shock for the whole country, cut back to, I guess, 24th March 2020. And for the next 2 months, nothing happened. So being a financial man, you will probably empathize with me. I had to report a quarter. We're listed on NASDAQ. We've been listed 11 years to the date. So today is a special date for us. And thank you. And having to report a quarter where you had dropped revenues by 95.5% isn't fun. So it's called an earnings call, and I started off by maybe a little tongue-in-cheek calling it a lack of earnings call. I don't think my investors were amused, but that's what we reported, and that was the quarter of April, May, and June. April and May were in total lockdown for the whole country. We started limping back in June. But really the kind of travel happening then was emergent travel, people who had to travel, people, or who had to use hotels to quarantine, etc. The summer, I think July, August, and September, we actually saw a really nice rebound. So I think between the first two waves, if I look at it from a quarterly point of view, that was a pretty strong quarter. We saw domestic come back, went to about 40% or so, which was pretty nice to see, or maybe 30, 35%. Actually, no, not that much. Second wave was much more. So yeah, closer to 30%, but nice to see it coming back. We were obviously faced with a very tough job of cutting costs. We can talk about that later if we have time. But in terms of trends, people started to venture out. Clearly, the new norm became, I'll rather drive. I'll drive a longer distance. Earlier on, I was okay with 6-7 hours. I'm now ready to do 10 hours of driving. I'd rather stay in either a resort, which has got wide set apart kind of villa options or rooms, not in a big box kind of building, or ideally in a homestay option. Homestays or villas were the ones that were preferred. People felt they could control the environment, and I don't think there was anything wrong with that. Typically, your interaction would be with one or two people, a caretaker or a cook. I know a lot of people, because they were driving, they even took along their cooks. And they said, we're just going to go up. And actually, I know enough people who have never come back, who went up to the hills way back then. We all know people and are very happy. And these are people either who had their own homes or friends' homes, and they're quite happy. And they're saying, listen, we don't have much kind of reason to be back physically. So they've kind of made that their home. But a lot of people finally by summer were done, younger people, and they ventured out. So that was first wave, second wave. First wave, the trough between the first and the second wave. Second wave was obviously deadly. I don't think anyone even wants to repeat. But before that, I think that winter saw very, very kind of strong comeback. So the real build-up when we touched 50%, even on some days, even 60, 65% of pre-COVID capacity. So we always take February 20 as our benchmark. And that was November, December, January, all the way till Feb. It was a wonderful climb up. People really thought it's not going to happen again in India. I think many of us just kind of said, hey, this is, we've licked it. We don't know how, but something's happened. And the best part was everyone said, we don't know how. So no one knew when that wave disappeared, why. Even till date, it's a mystery. But we were so happy. So a lot of people were traveling out the hills. Now mainstay hotels became more popular. By the way, the second big trend, or the third big trend, if I look at driving holidays, if I look at homestay options, resorts and villas, third. The fourth was premium hotels. Premium hotels were the preferred one. People kind of even flexed their budget for valid reason. Again, they felt more comfortable. They felt that they're all adhering to the norms. I think our top end hotels and even one or two layers below, they really did a very good job on COVID protocols. So did our airlines. I think the airlines have actually done a bang up job. We've all flown. I think you've done flights. You were mentioning to me you were in Gujarat last week or wherever. I've probably done maybe 10 flights in pandemic, including managed to go overseas twice, but lots of India trips all over, and Kashmir twice. And I saw in every airline trip, every plane trip, the staff, the crew was almost maniacal in making sure you never let your mask down. In fact, one or two of them, they said you'll keep your face shield on right through. You could argue or not, but once you're on board, as they say, the captain kind of is the big boss. And I had to keep it on, which was in a way great. So I think personally traveling is very safe because between you and the next person, you typically have 4 layers of protection. You got your 2 layers, the next person's got 2. If you want a third layer, you can have 5 layers. That's, it's not, if the virus can penetrate 4 or 5 layers, then we are anyway all dead kind of thing. So I think it's very safe. I think it's when you get there, what do you do? Are you disciplined or not? And we saw that definitely play out at that time. And then again, I think we were just hit so badly with this deadly second wave that people have taken a while to get to it. But people are restless. We see it back again, Vijay. So back again at domestic, in some days we are going 50%, we're going 60%, 65% on peak days of previous domestic. International is hit very badly. As you will know, and is a big surprise, by the way, inbound, which is not a very big part of our business now, very tiny actually. India is probably one of the few countries in the world where you can't enter the country if you don't have an Indian passport or you don't have a OCI card. So we have not even, extended reciprocal rights to the European countries who opened up. So I was very impressed with Switzerland. Switzerland opened up and, 2 months ago or 1.5 months ago and said, if you're double vaccinated, you're welcome to come and no quarantine. And that was huge. We saw a lot of people going, and then Germany followed, and France followed, and Spain followed, some with quarantine, some without. Today, there are 25 places Indians can technically go to, some with or without.
And we actually. But I'm going to ask you there. Does that mean that we could see a bit of a dip on the India side, where people were traveling within India because they had no option to go overseas? Now, if they've got an option to go overseas, will they, obviously the need to travel within India will fall, and therefore the occupancies and business within India will fall because people can now go overseas. Do you see that happening potentially?
Yeah, it's a great question. I believe not, Vijay. I believe not simply because there's a lot of pent-up demand. People have been dying to travel, trying to go out. Yes, there will be people who can afford and can go overseas, will go overseas, but there are more than enough people who want to travel. So, and as you know, we have a perennial situation of less supply. In peak season, there is not one part of the country which doesn't get sold out. So I don't think it will really dent it because the overall demand is even bigger. And mind you, the most favored destinations for Indians are still not open. So you still can't go to Thailand, you still can't go to Singapore, you still can't go to the US. UAE is just about opening up, but you've got to be a resident, blah, blah. So effectively you can't go. So 4 of the top 6 or 7 destinations are shut. And UK is just opened. So, okay, UK will definitely, but so because these, and where do you flip? So where are you indifferent? Typically it was a trip. Let's say I stay in North India, a trip in winter to Kerala was more expensive, as we all know, than a trip to Thailand. Just 4-star to 4-star, 5-star to 5-star, that kind of thing, right? Now that, if Thailand's not open, that doesn't flip it. You're not really competing with a lot of these markets when you compare a Maldives or when you compare a Switzerland. Your budget doubles or triples or whatever. Right, so I don't think it will dent it. I think there's plenty of demand.
I think that's really good news because it's been a bit of a concern, and I agree with you that the demand side is at this point strong enough. It may mean a little bit of change of profile from time to time, but in terms of volumes, it's still pretty much hold good.
I do think so.
Yeah, and how do you see, We've had airlines within India and overseas sort of trimming their capacities. And obviously, as demand comes back and then again dips and comes back, how do you see the airlines being able to cope with this? Whether it's India or whenever the international airlines are allowed to function, the international services vis-a-vis India. How do you see that working out?
Yeah, I think if there was ever a tough business to run, it was the airlines business, even pre-pandemic. Yeah, so I think Warren Buffett famously said the fastest way to become a millionaire is to be a billionaire and to start an airline. And if you go back in history, very few airlines have consistently made money or delivered returns. I mean, it's a tough business. And during the pandemic, it just became tougher by a big factor. That's the reality. It just became crazy because your fixed costs, biggest fixed cost is actually the least cost on the plane. That stayed unless you sent back planes, and you couldn't typically do that. So you held on to your planes. You still had parking fees. you still had crew that you paid for and staff. Yes, you could cut back some, but how many? Because we all know that you need the best of crew, you need the best of pilots, etc. It was only the fuel cost, which is the big variable cost, which has come down. It's actually no less than a miracle that all of our domestic carriers have survived the entire pandemic. Knock on wood, and they'll continue to. It's actually amazing. I mean, if there's one business which is, had their kind of, the wind knocked out of their sails, it's the airline business, but they've survived. And it's amazing. They got into cargo, they diversified, they did different things, they managed their costs. It is not just Indigo, because Indigo, we always said, has a very strong balance sheet, right? They're public, one knows their numbers. The other airlines are not in that strong shape when it comes to balance sheet. But they're still there. Now, Air India might have got benefited hugely from the bubble flights and Vande Bharat. But that is to the detriment largely of the international carriers. And I'm not saying, that's the right thing to do, because the international carriers are now crying hoarse saying, listen, guys, when can we resume normal scheduled flights? There's so much demand. Try getting a seat right now from any time in August and half of September to go to the US for, typically students, they're all going there or something. It's double the price and you'll barely get a seat. It's crazy. One of the busiest sectors has become Frankfurt to Mexico, and half the reason is Indians going to Mexico to cool their heels for 2 weeks so that they can get into the US. So all that kind of stuff is happening. There's a lot of demand right now pent up. So I think how the airlines have done it is fantastic. It's case study, each one of them. So, they all adopted different ways of doing it, but they're still around. And, I really hope that they get to taste, full-on demand, because they've really done the toughest thing. It's almost like India at Trent Bridge last week, where we did all the hard work, but we didn't get the last day. So I hope they'll get the last day to win the test match. But it's not been easy. The second toughest industry in this whole thing probably has been the hotel industry, because as suppliers, again, big fixed costs, whether the place, normally not on rent large hotels, but typically taken on loan, and you know more about this than me, but project finance, there are loans, there is term finance, you're paying a fixed return. There were some moratoriums which we eventually got, but not quite enough, right? They came very late and they were not big enough. So I think the hotels have also done an admirable job to keep going. And some of them have actually played on the front foot and took the risk. They opened up their hotels early. And for us, that was a great opportunity. They spoke to us. Most of them are very close partners. And we said, well, if you're going to open up, we will do everything to promote this to our platform. Right now, we're not ready to go ahead and advertise ATL. Like, we're not going to, scream it from the rooftops. We don't want to spend that kind of money. But guess what? We've got a huge base. We've got 50 million customer base, which we can reach out to with your offers, and they're all travelers. And so that worked out quite well. So I think a lot of the hotels who opened up either the entire property or one wing of the property or partially, I think they got the rewards every time it opened up. This time around, I think people feel the opening up might last even longer, despite the third wave. Firstly, I think most sensible people believe there will be a third wave. So you're not in denial. Versus the second wave, where most people thought not coming back to India, like I said. India is not going to have it, right? We were unprepared, government, everyone was unprepared. I think most people believe there's a third wave. The question only is how bad or how deadly it'll be. We have vaccinations on our side. Yes, we are not quite penetrated as many countries in the Western world, particularly if you look at UK and all, but it's not too bad in the cities. So responsible companies in travel, especially frontline companies, should go out of the way to double vaccinate their entire staff. It's a huge reassurance when you put that board out there that our staff is double vaccinated, whether I'm a restaurant, whether I'm a store, whether I'm a hotel, and especially when you're a hotel, because you're going to be interacting with staff, especially when you're an airline. So today you can get the vaccinations. I think everyone's resourceful enough and there is availability. And you put that out there, you have all your COVID protocols, but the most important one becomes 100% of staff is double vaccinated. And I think to do that, that's the way to build back responsibly and also in a very steady and solid manner, that we don't end up taking 2 steps forward and 5 steps back. So I'm hopeful it'll work out that way. But airlines, my God, it's just been a torrid time. And again, all our close partners, I've been talking to most of them. It's really, I don't envy them. They're in a really tough position.
You know, it's interesting because obviously the thing is demand and price, and both of them have to work, and they have to work at the right level. So I'm going to ask you a complicated, maybe a difficult question, but I think it's something that's very necessary for the industry. So we've got the demand side that obviously looks for deals all the time. On the supply side, whether it's the airlines or the hotels, as more deals become available, the yields to the airlines and to the hotels start dropping, whether it's the yield pre-commission or post-commission. Now, what's happening is that some of that is really squeezing the revenue growth ability of the suppliers, either the airlines or the hotels, both. And it's only benefiting the customer, maybe benefiting the MakeMyTrip and the agent, which has its healthy share of commission. Where does this sort of start evolving a little bit better so that the suppliers also get better value? Today, my sense is that the supply side gets squeezed on rate a bit too much. Yes, they may get the volume, but they might get squeezed on rate a bit too much. So where does that change?
Yeah, one important correction. So us as an intermediary, MakeMyTrip or GoIbibo or Redbus, all our three brands, we are also part of the guys who are paying for discounts out of our own pocket. So I'm not sure if it benefits us that much. We would be also very happy to have an industry where ARRs were higher and ASPs were higher, etc., etc. So, and we are very often.
I'm going to stop you there with a interjection, which I don't want to divert into because it can become a 3-hour conversation. But you are in the happy situation that the more loss you make, the higher valuation you get somehow. While for the brick and mortar industry, if we make a loss, we don't get a valuation.
Sir, I also have to rebut that. And despite being a CA, you have not been checking our reports. We are probably the only OTA in the world who has reported 2 profitable quarters in the pandemic.
So it's not really you in that sense. It's the wider business there.
Yeah. Sadly, and you're right. It's a 3-hour discussion. The overall internet market. There's a term called TAM. I'll just take 1 minute, which is total addressable market. There were about 110 million people buying stuff online pre-pandemic. That number is probably 250 million today, because during the pandemic, that's the only thing that worked. So it's been, in a bizarre sort of manner, COVID has been a huge gift for the entire internet economy, except travel. And probably my friend Ajay Bijli always corrects me, he says also for movie tickets. Because no one wants to obviously go to a movie. But if you look at whether it's food delivery, whether it's e-commerce or it's payments, everything's on fire. So there, the valuation game, what you said, seems to be working for now. But I can tell you, I've been listed long enough. That party doesn't last necessarily forever. All of them, the good companies, will very quickly pivot the model, will get the model right, will start getting the economies of scale like Amazon did worldwide. And people love to say 10 years they didn't make money. No one now talks about it because they obviously now, spew out cash. But coming more to us, or to the industry, if you look at the travel industry, which is the topic for today, that's one school of thought. So I come from, I've done economics in my undergrad, and I graduated in 1990. And so what we were taught was Keynesian economics. And Keynesian economics is largely demand and supply. And I don't remember too much from my economics, but the one thing I remember, and I've seen it play out in anything I've done, industry or money supply. Today, you look at why is the IPO market so crazy hot? It's all supply and demand. So we might want many things to happen, but the reality is it will be determined by what are the competing forces of supply and demand. And let's explain that a bit, right? Let's not leave it there, which is today you've got basically a buyer's market, right? Because today someone who wants to travel can by and large get very good deals at a very macro level. However, I gave you one exception, which was try flying to the US right now, because there's controlled capacity. If capacity was opened up,
one thing that let's address this question not only in the context of the pandemic period, but the larger business period, even pre or post pandemic. Yeah.
Good point. Good point. And actually, what I'm going to say, Vijay, applies for the entire. It applies for any time. If it was a free market, means you could add capacity. You would not have this situation, because any smart airline who had rights to fly on this, whether it was Air India, whether it was United, whether it was Lufthansa or anyone else who connects you through the continent or through the west or through the east, rather over the Pacific, would add capacity, would say, hey, this is great. That's what they do every time there's extra demand. They say, let's add capacity and let's make money when the, when the sun shines, we'll make hay. Similarly for the hotel industry. Now, you might think it's a great time to be a traveler. I'm getting great deals. But guess what? In November, December, and Jan, Kashmir was sold out completely. And again this summer, so I went back. I was there over New Year's. We were in Gulmarg, and this summer we went to Pahalgam. And of course, it was just so beautiful, so pristine, blah, blah. Everything was great. But all the hotels were getting full. I think we just beat the rush. We were there in June. We kind of beat that rush. I was beginning to pick up. More and more people were getting there. So suddenly, because of our fragility of supply, we are not a perfect market on the supply side because we take a long time to respond. But look at the non-hotel market, or the villas and apartment market, or the homestay market. Look at the way they've responded to this. Suddenly, you had a mushrooming of places where everyone's saying, hey, listen, I can give my space, because they said, you know what, people are ready to pay 20,000 rupees a night for a 3-bedroom cottage. The guy said, serious? Okay, I'll move out, I'll put this. So people do respond. So for us to want to say, what do we do with deals, is a little utopian, because I don't think we really control it. I think it's really controlled by the fact, if there's excess capacity, you will give a deal. But who gives a deal? You check out the ARRs that were happening right now in Kashmir, or when Goa started booming. Now Goa, we know after New Year's there was too much of partying, and Goa has restrictions and constraints. But the same story out there. You look at Goa and it was just crazy pricing. It's sold out. So you look at any place where there's enough demand, suddenly there are no deals because in the supply. But the moment for me, just to complete that thought, when I talk to my hotelier friends, I think there's something magical about the 50 to 60% mark. So that is the area in which you say, shouldn't we do this? When you're going over 60 on an upward trend, you're saying, listen, we're doing nothing. And you should do that as revenue managers. When you're going under 50, you start panicking. I think it's only between that phase of indifference, 50 to 60, where you're saying, okay, listen, we can take it easy. That's my belief. But it's open for debate. Also, we have to be very careful. This is, I don't think people can start getting together and saying, let's do this. That fundamentally is illegal. That's cartelization.
Yeah, sure. And that's not what one is sort of aiming for or even driving at. But, the reality on the other side is, if we look at the numbers, the lack of comparable ADR levels at hotels across the country, across segments in India vis-a-vis some of their international markets, for the kind of properties that we have, the inability to grow those rates. So there has to, I guess the travel trade needs to work together in some form to find a solution for that as well. Because if you don't have that, the ability to create new supply comes down as well, because there isn't that kind of a return. So, but tell me, do you see India being different in their attitudes towards this from, let's say, other countries, maybe the West or other countries?
Not very different. I think as a country, as a nation, as a government, I did mention, I think we've got to be more open now to letting people in who are doubly vaccinated by a WHO approved vaccine. Perhaps insist on an RT-PCR test also, just the way the countries are. So I think we should be reciprocal. I don't think we can expect to be one-sided and say, listen, we're not going to let anyone in. Let's face it, who's going to come to India today? The people who are going to come to India today are not the typical tourists. This would be people who are coming largely for work. And we need that to continue business. There are enough projects, there are enough people who travel for work, so we should allow them in. And then it could be the hardy traveler, the intrepid traveler who says, I'm ready to do it. But are the rest of the world? No, they'll postpone their trip, I think, by a year or two. They'll say, let situation improve. If India shows great management of the third wave, and by that time vaccination is up, and then you say, listen, now our vaccination levels in all these places is 50-60% penetration, and all our hotels are fully vaccinated, you'll start getting people coming back. But we are not doing that. We actually announced a scheme which said we'll have no visa fee for the first, I think, whatever, 100,000 tourists or something. But today you can't, today there's no tourists because you haven't allowed the guy to come in. So I think we need to be more open. I'm a big believer in testing. I think we should use testing. We should use all of these protocols more. Yes, a lot of people are wary of tests taken in India because there have been reports of fudge tests and all. And I think there's a simple solution to that. All these countries have got their emissaries here, their embassies here. They should approve a couple of labs and they should say, we'll take tests only from these labs. And labs where you can't fudge it, or labs where you can, even the embassy, because they're not doing anything, issuing visas, they should actually validate everyone's test all online. They should say, send the test. Those guys should talk to the lab, say, so-and-so person tested this thing, and they should validate and say, good to go. So, 72 hours is enough time, submit your certificate. They can do many more things. I was surprised, there was an airport spot test suddenly, which Lufthansa came out with. My son was traveling, going back where he's based in April. And at the counter, he was told you have to get a rapid antigen test. And we didn't know about it. Luckily, we had time to scramble outside, get it done in 15 minutes, come back. But, all of these protocols are good, but just inform everyone beforehand. I think it's a good protocol because what if you picked up something in the last 2 days? If it's, do every test, satisfy yourself, but then let the guy in. And quarantine doesn't work. Quarantine doesn't work.
Quarantine doesn't work. Quarantine doesn't work. I mean,
no one's going unless you're going home, where you're saying, okay, listen, I can quarantine, I can do a home quarantine, but quarantine is not for tourism. Quarantine is only for home returnees. And those people left their country because there was an emergency. They came to see someone who was unwell, sick, and they had to go back, whether they did it in Singapore or in London. But not for tourism. It kills it. I think use technology, use science, use all the kind of tests you want, do a test on arrival even. And once you are satisfied, you've got to move on with life.
Yeah, and we've got to find a way to get business travelers back.
Yeah.
Because if we don't have business travelers sorry, there's an echo. Two instruments going on.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a jitter. I think it's okay now.
Okay, yeah, that's good. Yeah. So unless we get business travelers, I think we're going to obviously not get to the kind of capacities that we do.
Yeah, and that solves the previous question, this previous problem you said with the industry has. You made a great point, Vijay, which is what do hotels need to do? Now, this will help the hotels because we all know business travel fills up in all the city hotels, the majority of the rooms, even in some of the leisure centers. And let's not forget, MICE is gone for a long time. No one is looking forward to being packed into a large banquet hall with a couple of hundred people. That's not happening for a while. Events and conferences are not happening for a while. We all know that. So therefore, it's even more important that you can get the individual traveler on business to come back to help our own economy. And we've been actually lobbying through CII, through other forum with the government that, about time we open up inbound. This is a very important part. It's high paying, it's high ARR, it helps the yield. Also, by the way, it's long AP, which is long advance purchase window, which means it gives you a very good and comfortable way to manage your revenue because you get to know well in advance that someone's going to come in. So, okay, 25% is going to get taken by international business. Another 10, 20, 30% by domestic business. Now I've got 55 taken, I'm comfortable. Now I can price myself right for the leisure market or for the wedding market or for various other things that are happening.
Yeah, I guess, and I'm just figuring a guess here, and I don't want to say anything unnecessarily negative, but I guess there's also a concern that if you open up the country and then you don't find too many takers, that might become a bit of a judgment on our health situation. So maybe the one is being a little bit cautious about that. But that's a different view there. So, there's three elements that you play with. There's the supplier side, there's the consumer side, and there's the intermediary side, which is, let's say, a MakeMyTrip. Who leads whom? Who guides whom? Who incentivizes whom? What is the interplay between these three?
Yeah, I think we are very, very clear, and remind everyone in the company all the time. We are in existence because these two constituents exist. We are in existence, and we will survive, and we will only thrive if the consumer is there and the supplier is there. So, we are only there, like you rightfully said upfront. We are facilitators, Vijay. We can make it easier for people to buy travel. Why did online travel become so popular? Online travel became so popular, not just in India, anywhere in the world. It became popular simply because it empowered the consumer for the first time. Prior to online travel, the consumer typically was at the mercy of an offline travel agent. I'm not saying all are bad, there are many great ones, but typically an offline travel agent sold you what they wanted to sell you. You could be sitting with them on their green and black screen, the cryptic screen, right? And you're working on the screen and the guy saying, ye flight available nahi hai. By the way, that was a big reason for me to set up and said, listen, today we need transparency. Technology gives you all the information. Put the information out there, let the guy make a informed decision. Why are you giving him restricted choices? So I think it was a heady mix when we were able to launch and give customers the ability to see all the options and make an informed decision. Do I want to save 200 rupees or 500 rupees by flying 5 o'clock in the morning with less leg room and no meals? Or do I want to spend another 1,000 rupees by getting more leg room at a comfortable time and getting a meal? It was as simple as that. And I'm not even comparing business with economy. I'm just saying with an economy, that's what it came down to. And people said, we love this. Then secondly, you could do it 24/7. Thirdly, you didn't have to call someone and wait for the person to pick up, then wait for the person to get back. You got done. And this generation, especially if you look at the youth, they're impatient. They want to do things at 2 a.m. in the morning, not talk to anyone, get done and take it. So that's why it really started. So we will be able to facilitate only if there's a healthy and robust industry and constituents on both sides. So demand, consumer, great time for the economy. Look at the markets. Yesterday might have been a little bit of a correction, but otherwise look at our markets. They're on fire. And we all know, you're a Bombay guy and you're sitting there and you all know what happens to Bombay when the market's at. Everyone's very excited. So, and people are spending, and look at almost every industry is doing well. So it's a little mind-boggling. You're saying, hey, what happened out here? We thought we had a pandemic. How come everyone's doing well? But except again, a few businesses like ours right now. And on the other side, you've got to have the very important constituent, which is the suppliers. We spoke about the airline, we spoke about the hotels. There are, we have a very large bus ticketing brand called Red Bus. All of these are very important and they need to stay healthy through all of this. So what should have been done? Definitely a soft loan package and support, financial support was needed for this industry. It's the worst hit industry, everyone agrees. I must have done, I think, 100 government meetings at different levels through the pandemic. Everyone agreed it's worst hit. Yes, we'll get something, but that didn't. So at some point of time, most of the industry was saying, listen, we have to be Atmanirbhar. We've now got to take care of ourselves. Because by the time the moratorium came, it was too little too late. And, everyone, so the mortality has been actually very high in our industry. We just don't know it because it's a very fragmented industry. Our industry is like an iceberg. We only see top 10% of the industry. I can ask anyone, you name, 100 hotel brands in India, they will probably stop at 20, or they'll struggle, maybe they'll do 30. They won't know the bulk. That's the iceberg, because we are very fragmented at the bottom. We are made of really small players, and so many have just disappeared. They don't have a voice. They've just started doing something else. They had to survive. So I think we've been ravaged, and we'll get to know only when things come back. Yes, the strong will get stronger, but it's been a very tough time. So to answer your original question,
that lack of scale that you referred to, is that something that you see as an opportunity, or something where you are an important facilitator to help them address things? Does it help to almost act as an informal consolidator of that small scale?
I don't think consolidator in our business, there are others who do that business model. So, I mean, if you look at Oyo, that's their business model, or Fab or Tribo, that's their business model. I think we are happy with fragmentation. There's no problem. We are a marketing channel for them, and we will help them digitize their inventory, and we will help them sell, hopefully, the last available room to anyone who's searching for it. And because it's a popular platform, we'll get customers from all over. It will never be viable for a small player to advertise nationally, but you don't know where your customer comes from, so you have to advertise nationally. So we provide that platform because we have so many people coming, and then we are able to optimize a lot of these things through our funnels, through our product and kind of technology, which we understand well, and even give them a lot of feedback, which we do regularly, detailed feedback to all our suppliers, what's selling, what's not, without giving, you can't give specific names, but in the cohort, why are you overpriced? Why, if you were to do this, you could do this. The rest of the cohort is doing well, what you're not doing, etc., etc. I think it's pretty invaluable. I think we play our part, and again, in a free economy, you'll only stay in business if you're delivering value. So there'll constantly be a tussle anywhere. You talk to any supplier, distributor, everyone's fighting for commissions. I've been on PAM trips where I've been invited to speak of some of the largest hotel chains with their hotel partners. And in the evening, after a couple of drinks, the kind of stuff I was hearing from their partners saying, oh my God, they gouge us for money, they do this. And I'm saying, what is this, guys? You're on a PAM trip paid by them. But that's life. So I think we will always have those struggles, but you have to keep delivering value. And if you're not delivering value, you'll be rendered irrelevant. So I think that's very important. And for us, we are also driven by the notion that we want to be ideally the lowest cost distribution channel for our partners. If we are not, again, they'll find a lower cost. So we have to deliver that value. Now, if they feel that it's better to do self-marketing and do direct selling, but then all the marketing is theirs too. So we're doing all the marketing costs, etc. So yeah, I think it's tenuous, but if you're conscious about the value you deliver, I think then it's a decent relationship.
So I'm going to ask you two questions here, and they're slightly apart, but I think they come out of this conversation. The first one is, obviously every airline and every hotel company of substance will have its own digital marketing platform and its digital marketing efforts. Do you see that as being highly competitive, or do you see that as being sort of, as being able to, in the wider sense, working together?
Yeah.
And the second question I have is that, let's say, from an international market looking into India point of view, how do you see, let's say, somebody like a Booking.com? I'm just using that as an example. There could be others. How do you see that playing out vis-a-vis your ability to penetrate that international market coming into India?
Yeah, they're fantastic questions, by the way. So let me try to attempt to answer both. Or maybe the second one first. It's probably a little easier. So in the second one, it comes down to where your source market is and where you're strong. So for us to compete with a Booking.com successfully in Europe is pretty hard. We're an unknown brand in Europe. Booking.com is a huge brand in Europe, and customers in Europe will trust Booking.com. Customers in Europe are unlikely to trust us as much as Booking.com, even if we advertise out there. But flip that around. In India, we are a very well-known brand. So when our Indian customer travels within India, both things should play to our advantage, which is the first thing that should play to our advantage is that on the consumer side, we have great traction. And the second is on the supply side also, we have very good traction because we have a large number of people, our market managers, they're working with hotels constantly, they're trying to get them online, they're delivering value, they have a relationship, etc., etc. So Indians traveling within India is clearly our moat, where we should be able to do better than anyone, just like Booking will do it for Europe to Europe. Indians traveling overseas is also something which we should be able to do better than anyone else. Why they trust our brand. Now, how do we solve for supply? That becomes very interesting.
Yes.
How you solve for supply, or how we have done it is, we said which are the top 10 or 20 destinations Indians go to, and there which are the kind of hotels where Indians would like to stay in. So there, let us go and build our own supply, which is build our own supply, meaning build our own supply relationships. And let's get the partners to come on, let's work with them as though it was an Indian hotel. But what about the long tail? Now, this would include a city of Bangkok and Phuket and Singapore and London, etc. What about the long tail of hotels? So when we went to 20 cities, in every hotel, we probably did 50 on our own. So we had 1,000 hotels to start with direct contracts. Long tail, we took from the large consolidators, or we took from the large B2B players. But over time, we realized we need to go deeper in these cities. We also curated the hotels. We went to hotels where Indians like to stay. See, it's not uncommon for one member or more of an Indian traveling party to be vegetarian. And of course, we have those famous 10 shades of being vegetarian in India. So we went to the hotels where you could get veg food, because if you don't get veg food and you're a vegetarian, we know how hard it is. You know, my wife's staunch vegetarian. Every time we travel, it's really hard because she won't even eat egg as an ingredient. It becomes really hard if you go overseas. So if you find a hotel which sells veg food, it's very comfortable. You're saying, okay, listen, lunch, I'll figure out something. You know, I have a sandwich to a margarita pizza, but you know, dinner, I want to have a good kind of tasty hot dinner. So we would do all of that. Then we went to more cities and we went deeper. So now our mix of direct hotel supply we've been building organically has gone up, but our secondary supply we still get from long tail and we choose it. So conversely, it works the same for booking. For booking for Indians, Europeans coming to India, they'll do very well. For Expedia, Americans coming anywhere, going anywhere in the world or within America, they'll do very well. So what is your home market, and have you done a good job of both demand and supply? Now, please remind me of your first question because it was a tough one. I got carried away.
The first question was about each of the chains having their digital platforms, growing their digital platforms.
No. It's a great point. So I think it's inevitable, Vijay. It's going to happen, right? In fact, there are not too many industries in the world where it doesn't happen. Yes, you can say consumer goods. So consumer goods, you try buying today a TV from any of the large suppliers, you can't. They will always say, no matter who you know, they'll say, "Arey, please go to Vijay Sales, go to Chroma, go to here, go to where, whatever, and go buy it from there." And it happened with me recently. We'll give you the service. Why? Because they've done the math. It doesn't make sense to set up their own retail stores. Everyone tried experience stores and all. They're saying, no, we'll get the partners to do it. Let them carry the inventory, the working capital, everything else, and we'll do the service. Because even service, we don't know very often, even that's been outsourced. So at the end of the day, by the way, most of them are not even manufacturing. I was shocked to learn that Sony doesn't make TVs any longer. That TV is someone else's, they just put this thing on it. It's actually the TVs, the picture tubes made by LG. So you get to know this later, whatever. But in our industry, I think it's inevitable that people will go direct. Airlines have always wanted to go direct to save commission. Right now, the commission is down to nothing. And we try to tell the airlines, listen, we're charging you in some cases 1%, some cases maybe 1.5%, some cases 0.5%. There's nothing. But we're doing so much, sir. We even do your post-sale service for you because we have agents. If they buy from us, they'll pick up. So I think they realize that because it's expensive to do the end-to-end. Building a platform is tough, but it's not impossible. Building a really good platform which competes with customer experience like you'll get on a top OTA is not that easy, but you know, the airlines are big companies, some of them do it and they have wonderful websites. Similarly, some of the hotel sites are fantastic in the big chains. Internationally, they're great sites, but customers want choice. Not everyone is clear from the beginning that, listen, I'm going to Bombay and I'm only going to stay with the Taj. I'm making it up. Or I'm going to Delhi, I'm only going to stay in the Oberois or whatever it is. Not everyone. Everyone's saying, I want to see a deal. In fact, everyone wants to see a deal. Yes, you have in business, you can say there's a lot of loyalty. When there's business travel, there's loyalty because you say, listen, my work is in BKC. I've stayed in all 4 hotels out there. This one works very conveniently for me. I'm going to come to that hotel and stay there. That happens. So that kind of business could go direct or could go through the TMC. So the travel management company or the corporate company could get that business. Why? Because then that business will manage everything, which is cancellations, changes, refunds, a car, etc. So again, the same principle applies. Are you still providing value to your customer? If you're providing value to your customer, you'll be there. If not, someone will come and eat your lunch. So I don't even remotely look at it as competitive because it's part of the game. Plus, we are not trying to be 100% of anyone's business. We are very happy if we are, 5, 10, 15%. I don't think we're more than that with anyone. 10% is a lot. If we can deliver 10% of sales to people, that's phenomenal. Then we are probably their largest partner because they have so many avenues. They have direct sales internet, they have direct sales phone, they have travel management companies corporate, they have tour operators, they have the mom and pop small travel agent, and then they have various OTAs. So I think we right now aspire to be 10. Yes, in some cases we might be 20, 25. Every now and then when I look at this and I see in some cases where 25%, I get worried. I said, I think we're over indexed there. Guys, I would much rather diversify it because who knows what will happen to a particular property tomorrow.
And would that give you an indicator of what, or would that give us an indicator of what you might be planning for the future? And I don't know to what extent it is, and if I am wrong, please correct me, but let's say more of TMC work or other aspects of hotel business than just rooms. Do you think that would be an opportunity for you?
No, absolutely. So, we were always in the homestay market, but the pandemic gave us the clear direction that we need to do much more work out here. So now we have 30,000 properties on homestays, and that's become a very important part of what we do. And you can see some of the largest chains now building homestays. So, yes, you've got Taj with Ama, and Ama's been growing. And, so you've got many such people who are doing very homestay-like properties. Of course, it's a challenge because to get scale is not that easy. So that's one of the areas we will definitely be in. Will we go into the supply side? Highly unlikely. We believe we are a technology company that happens to be in travel. So we will stick to our knitting. We don't understand supply that well, and I don't think we want to be there.
You will never be a brick and mortar company, or you'll never have a brick and mortar set of assets, like a reverse integration.
That's what I said. It's highly unlikely. I've stopped saying never because, we've all seen the world go upside down. So never is dangerous, but it's really highly unlikely. I can tell you we don't even discuss it. So let me just I don't want to get anyone worried, and for multiple reasons. One, we don't get that business. B, I think our neutrality goes away, Vijay. So, yes, it's very important to be neutral. You can work with everyone. Then tomorrow there's a conflict of interest, right? Because then we'll have supply in 30 cities, 50 cities, 100. Why would anyone else want to work with us knowing fully well that, so I don't think it works too well.
It actually breaks your model.
Yeah, I think it becomes pretty tricky to manage, and I like to keep business simple. So hopefully that we don't have to go there and there's enough work to do. On the other hand, through the pandemic, we launched in Middle East and the GCC in a big way. So our brand has become a local brand there. Actually, just about 1 year gone doing that. We're in Arabic out there. So we're in all those 9, 10 countries, including in Saudi, etc. And we're growing that. That's an exciting market for us. Incidentally, we also had a part acquired a company where we will eventually own it 100%. That's a travel management company. It's a Bombay-based company called Quest to Travel, which had built a very good, robust technology platform for large corporates. So small corporates, we do ourselves. SMEs, we do ourselves. We have something called MyBiz, which is a self-service platform. But Quest to Travel is a full-blown one for large corporates. So people like HDFC use them, the Aditya Birla Group uses them. So we own majority in that company, and we think it's definitely an area we'd like to get to. So anything on the intermediary side, which we can take online, where we can apply technology, that's our intersection of our Venn diagram. So that we like, that we get.
Okay. Sorry, I was just trying to see what questions that come through.
No problem.
So you have a lot of data, obviously, that comes through your system. Obviously, there's questions around data security and privacy, and in India we still don't have such rigor, but obviously the international markets there is more rigor around that. And then it's the quality of data that you own. So two questions here. One is how difficult or how sort of challenging is it for you in terms of managing the data privacy aspects? And second is, how would you possibly look at monetizing some of that data?
Yeah, it's a huge issue, and I think we've been, very, very acutely aware of what we're dealing with right from the beginning, because let's not forget, for the first 5 years of existence, we only worked on the NRI market, non-resident Indians in the US coming to India. And that market was very particular about their data. So I think very early on, we built the kind of technology and the layers with security inbuilt in them, where we will never take on financial data of customers, where all the payment data will be encrypted. So we're not going to save any data which is not encrypted. And if it's encrypted, then it can't be misused. But yes, you have a lot more data. I mean, if Vijay Thacker has bought with us 20 times, we know a lot of stuff of what you can do and what you've done. We use that data to personalize your next experience, but not as a one-on-one, as a cohort. So just like Vijay, who's bought, let's say, business class tickets from us, stayed in Goa, stayed in Delhi, stayed in a few other places in 5 stars, there'll be about 1,000 other people who've done the same. So for those 1,000 people cohort, we'll start showing you only refined searches which are more relevant to you, which everyone does personalization. But we are absolutely very, very particular about how to safeguard the data that we keep. We have multiple levels of security. Again, everything's encrypted. We also use the Amazon web services. We use the cloud, which also adds levels of security. So far, knock on wood, we have not had any case, but there's constant threat. So if you were to ask our CTO what gives him sleepless nights, he'll say it's about data privacy, data security. So one is the policies and the intent. The second is, have you backed it up with the kind of infrastructure that you need? So we have over-invested in that. That being said, you can never, ever be too careful in this line. Absolutely. Always, yeah, there's always a risk factor.
Yeah, but I think what you're telling us is something that should be very reassuring for the market. Not that there was a question, but I'm just adding to the fact it is reassuring to the market, and to the extent that the market is not conscious about this, they should be, and the foreigners element should certainly feel more comfortable with this.
Yeah, absolutely.
We are down to the last 4 minutes. I've got 2 questions for you. Actually, 3 questions, and I'm going to try and rush them in quickly. Okay. Luxury versus mid-market, and the pricing for luxury versus, creating the right pricing for luxury. Do you see there is a potential to sort of adjust the balances between different segments, the upscale, the luxury, a little bit better? Or do you think it's just going to be left to market demand supply?
Yeah, the latter is where I go. I know many people have tried. See, the good part about luxury is it's largely price inelastic to a certain extent. In fact, there's a theory of inverse price inelasticity in luxury goods. We all know that, right? And that's fascinating, which is the more expensive you are, the more aspirational you are. That happens in the highest end. So that might happen in resorts in the Maldives. Back home, it might happen in some of the palaces in Rajasthan and the villas-like properties. It might happen out there, but beyond a certain point, people will also say, listen, we're not going to pay much more than this, right? So I think it's demand supply. I think a lot of the high-end hotels have actually discounted during the pandemic and have revised that. They actually, many of them realized they did too much. And why they did that was not because they got too much demand or something else. No, I don't think they were soon they were very happy with quality is what we learned. So I think they want to even be mindful of who's coming in because of other guests, etc. And I'm very happy. So I think you can self-regulate yourself if you're luxury, because we all know that the markup is huge, right? For every room sold or every trip sold, you can make a lot of money, but you want to make sure those people are coming back. So it'll self-regulate a bit. It will be demand and supply, but again, I think there is at some level there's price elasticity everywhere.
Okay. Big data, AI, blockchain. How important will this be? What degree of role will this play in the future for our industry?
Not future already. I mean, the only one I would say more future is blockchain, and I have some ideas there. But already using AI since the last 3 years now. We have chatbots. We have Myra on MakeMyTrip. We have Gia on Goa Bibo, which is all AI. It makes no sense to put people to answer repetitive questions, which you know and you can pre-anticipate. You should be able to do that. Not only that, you should be able to learn, because if this question is asked and then this is asked, it's pretty sure what the third one will be. And then you can serve that back into the system. So AI is already in. If you're not using AI, then you're missing a big thing. Big data, or I'd say data science, just to be generic. I mean, big data and deep tech gets a little techy. Data science is going to be the core backbone of any online business you build, any internet business. The best business in the world do a phenomenal job of data science. They have hundreds of people actually, cranking software to actually measure, to analyze, and to give business inputs and to give product team inputs of what they need to do better. Because really, in data we trust. Numbers just don't lie, and there's so much information, the wealth of information out there. If we don't tap it, then we're doing ourselves a disservice. When it comes to blockchain, I think blockchain can be productively used. It's not being used right now. I think it can be. In fragmented models and disaggregated models, I think it's a pretty smart way. Do I know enough about it to actually give a solution right now? Not really, but we are thinking about this. I think it's a very smart, secure way of managing fragmented pieces of information. So maybe a very fragmented market like the cab market. If they were all to get together, let's say all the cab operators, intercity cab operators, were to get together and build something. Now, can they is a different thing. Or the homestay market. So it could be done in an interesting way, but I think it'll come down to how well the industry can work together.
Yeah. Last question for you, Deep. What are your 3 mantras for success?
Okay. I don't know 3 or more or less, but let me try it. So the first one is really been to be very focused about building a brand and a business which is durable, a brand and a business which, where every customer, for me, the goal is every customer should be a brand ambassador. We're not quite there, but we can get better. So really, I learned about Six Sigma in my last job before starting MakeMyTrip in G Capital. And I think to get to that level of operational excellence would be great. So I think that's one, which is you don't just settle for, suboptimal, because if you want to deliver at scale, then you've got to have zero defect kind of thing. That's very important. I think the second one is you can't really do it alone. So build a really high-performing culture. It starts with hiring really fantastic people. So I like to hire mini entrepreneurs. And then, which means that they like to be told what to do, but not how to do it. And soon over time, they don't even need to be told what to do, because they will tell you what to do. So surround yourself with high quality people who challenge you, and create a culture where they can challenge you, where it's perfectly okay to get challenged.
Yes.
And to admit that you're wrong. So I think that's worked very well for us for sure. Yeah, I think again, keeping it simple, if you do these 2 things, the rest works. But we do believe at Fun at Work. I'm a huge believer of that. You got to, the 2 go hand in hand. And when you're working from home, it really came down to how strong are your bonds with your team. And I'm very, very proud to say that during the first wave, no one batted an eyelid, no one hesitated taking huge cuts in salary, depending on the level they were. All the way from 100% down to 10%, depending on their levels. People took those cuts, so I think we're doing something right. So yeah, those it would be around that.
Thank you. I think that's there's so much more I could ask you, but we have an hour. We've run out of time. I wish you the best. MakeMyTrip. May you sort of help make the India trip for all the foreigners who can come to India. All the best to you, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Vijay. Lovely chatting.
Thank you. All the best. Bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you, everybody, for attending, and look forward to our session for September. Thank you. The announcement will come out in a few days. Thank you.